What if the person you humiliated at the checkout line turned out to own the entire company you depend on to survive today? A single cruel laugh will cost an empire. One wrong glance will destroy reputations. And when the truth comes out, there will be no second chances. Stay with us. Because what happens next will rewrite everything you think you know about power, pride, and the cost of cruelty. The bright fluorescent lights of the Harrington supermarket buzzed overhead as the automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and in walked a young woman who did not belong. At least not in their eyes. She wore a plain gray sweater, faded jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. Her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, no designer bag swinging from her arms like trophies of status. Her name was Amelia Hart, and the moment she stepped past the threshold, a ripple passed through the store like an electric charge. One cashier nudged another, whispering behind manicured hands. A manager standing near the front adjusted his tie and frowned, already suspicious, already judgmental, as if her very presence was an insult to the polished floors and gleaming aisles lined with imported goods. Amelia pushed a cart forward, her movements calm, deliberate, oblivious to, or perhaps determined to ignore, the dozens of eyes that followed her every step with thinly veiled contempt. A group of women clustered near the organic produce section giggled as she passed, their voices slicing through the air in sharp, cruel tones. "Maybe she's lost," one said, loud enough for Amelia to hear. "Or maybe she's just here to see how the rich shop," another chimed in, her laughter like nails tapping glass. Amelia said nothing, her face a perfect mask of serenity, but inside, her heart pounded against her ribs like a caged bird. She had expected judgment. She had not expected it to cut so quickly, so mercilessly. As she reached for a carton of strawberries, a young man in a store uniform, probably a supervisor, judging by the pompous way he carried himself, approached her, flashing a tight, patronizing smile. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, the undertone clear. "You don't belong here." Amelia shook her head politely. "I'm fine. Thank you." The young man didn't move, his eyes flickering from her cheap clothes to her battered canvas tote bag, as if mentally calculating how much trouble she was worth. "If you're just browsing, we ask that customers limit their time in the store," he added with a sugary venom, loud enough for several nearby shoppers to hear. Heads turned, a mother pulled her designer stroller closer, as if shielding her child from contamination. Amelia nodded once, slowly, and continued down the aisle, her fingers tightening around the cart handle, her jaw set with quiet defiance. She had come here with a purpose, and she would not be driven out by sneers and whispered cruelties. Not yet, but as she disappeared deeper into the polished aisles of Harrington supermarket, the contempt that followed her trailed behind like smoke, thickening, darkening, ready to ignite. It didn't take long for the snickers to grow bolder, for the whispers to sharpen into open jabs that sliced through the air as Amelia moved through the pristine aisles like an unwelcome ghost. Near the bakery section, two teenage girls in matching cashmere sweaters pretended to stumble into her, laughing as one theatrically held her nose and exclaimed, "You, smells like poverty," while a nearby mother gave Amelia a pitying look and ushered her child away, as if she might catch whatever disease modesty had become in their gilded world. Amelia kept her head down, her knuckles whitening on the cart handle, her breath tight in her chest, pretending not to hear, pretending she could still shop with dignity even as the ground beneath her seemed to tilt further with every step. A man in a sharp navy suit, reeking of self-importance, leaned over the frozen food section and called out mockingly, "Miss, aisle 6 has all the discount bins, might be more your speed," and laughter exploded around him like a firecracker, sharp and cruel, echoing off the tile floors and gleaming shelves. Amelia's ears burned, but she kept moving, lifting a carton of milk with hands that shook only slightly, willing herself to become invisible, to disappear into the blandness of the aisles. But invisibility was a luxury they refused to grant her. No, they wanted her to feel it, to absorb every sneer, every sideways glance, every smirk carved deep into her skin like invisible wounds. At the self-checkout line, the tension thickened. A cashier with a gleaming name tag that read, Daphne stared her down, arms crossed, chewing gum with slow, deliberate contempt. Amelia placed her items carefully on the scanner, trying to ignore the deliberate slowness of the machine, the way Daphne leaned over and muttered just loud enough for others to hear. Hope she's got enough pennies to cover this, eliciting another round of chuckles from the bored elite shoppers, who had nothing better to do than amuse themselves with cruelty. And just when she thought it couldn't worsen, she felt the phone cameras. The subtle click of shutters, the soft giggles as someone whispered, Bet this'll go viral. Look at her. Someone was filming her, turning her quiet humiliation into entertainment, packaging her shame for views and likes and ugly laughter in the dark corners of the internet. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, a deep, hollow thudding that echoed in her ears, drowning out the world. She clenched her jaw, fighting back the sting behind her eyes, refusing to break, refusing to give them that satisfaction. But the weight was growing unbearable, the cruelty closing in like a noose, and somewhere, deep inside, something ancient and powerful began to stir. A storm rising slowly in the depths of her soul, biding its time. Amelia barely made it past the checkout when it happened. A sharp voice crackled through the overhead speaker, too loud, too pointed, slicing through the tension-choked air like a blade. Security to the front desk. Possible shoplifting in progress. Heads turned instantly, 100 pairs of eyes snapping toward her, as if the announcement had dragged them on invisible strings, their faces twisted into eager, hungry masks, waiting, salivating, desperate to witness the spectacle of her downfall. A heavy-set guard appeared from nowhere, face hard, expression already guilty of judgment, and without a word, he stomped toward Amelia, grabbing the handle of her cart with one thick hand and barking, "Step away from the cart, ma'am." Now, Amelia froze, confusion and humiliation crashing together in her chest like a wreck, her voice trembling as she stammered, "I paid for these." But the guard didn't care, didn't even glance at the receipt crushed between her fingers. He yanked the cart away so violently that one of the milk cartons toppled out and burst open across the polished floor, splattering her shoes. And that was the signal for the crowd to erupt. Laughter, loud and vicious, clapping like thunder against the glass storefront windows. Someone filmed her with shaking hands, laughter bubbling out of them uncontrollably. Someone else muttered, "Knew she couldn't afford it," their voice sharp as broken glass. Daphne, the gum-chewing cashier, stood behind her counter with a smirk so satisfied it could have cracked the floor tiles. Knew she was trouble the moment she walked in. She drawled to a nearby customer, loud enough for half the store to hear. Amelia's face burned hotter than fire. She tried to step forward, tried to explain, but the guard shoved the receipt into her chest and pointed toward the exit with all the subtlety of a man herding cattle. Out, now, the automatic doors whooshed open, and the cold slap of the outside air hit her like an accusation. Stumbling over the milk-soaked floor, Amelia turned, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision, and for one fleeting, agonizing second, she saw herself through their eyes. Small, worthless, disposable, but then, just as she reached the sidewalk, tires screeched at the curb. A sleek, black car, silent, gleaming like a panther, pulled up, the door swinging open with the effortless precision of money and power, and from within, stepping out into the blinding light of the supermarket's shame-soaked entrance, came a man who would shatter every cruel assumption they had made in the next breath. The storm Amelia had been hiding all along. The moment he stepped out of the car, the air changed. It thickened, it tightened, as if the very molecules recognized the shift in power before the people did. He was tall, immaculately dressed in a tailored black suit that whispered wealth with every precise movement, his jaw sharp, his eyes colder than a winter storm, surveying the scene with a detachment that was somehow more terrifying than rage. The crowd outside the Harrington supermarket froze mid-laughter, mid-sneer, mid-whisper, as if the world itself had pressed pause. He moved toward Amelia with long, deliberate strides, the glint of a platinum watch flashing beneath his cuff, the heavy stillness of inevitability settling over the street. Amelia stood motionless, her chest heaving, her hands trembling, but when he reached her, he didn't hesitate. He took her hand in his, lifted it gently, kissed her knuckles as if she were royalty fallen among peasants. Gasps rippled through the onlookers like aftershocks. "I'm sorry I'm late," he murmured, his voice low but carrying, slicing cleanly through the thick, stunned silence. "I had to finish signing the acquisition papers." He turned then, slowly, methodically, to face the gaping crowd, his arm sliding around Amelia's shoulders in a gesture so possessive, so absolute, that no one could mistake its meaning. "Allow me to introduce myself," he said, his voice still soft, almost conversational, but weighted with the kind of authority that didn't need to be shouted to be obeyed. "My name is Nicholas Ashford, CEO of Ashford Holdings, and as of 15 minutes ago, the Harrington supermarket chain belongs to me." The words dropped like a bomb, shattering whatever thin grip on reality the crowd still clung to. Murmurs erupted, rising in frantic waves. "Ashford, the Ashford. He bought Harrington today. Oh my God, that's Amelia Hart." Faces drained of color, jaws slackened. Laughter died so thoroughly it seemed obscene that it had ever existed. Nicholas's arm tightened slightly around Amelia, pulling her in closer, a shield, a declaration. "This woman," he said, voice razor sharp now, "is Amelia Hart, my fiancé, and the next time any of you think to lay a hand on her, insult her, or treat her as less than the queen she is, you'll answer to me, personally." Silence reigned, vast and crushing, as every person who had mocked, laughed, or sneered now stood trembling in the ruins of their own arrogance, their careers, their reputations, and their futures dangling by a thread they could no longer touch. Amelia lifted her chin, her dignity no longer battered but blazing, standing not behind Nicholas, not beneath him, but beside him, a storm in her own right. And for the first time that day, it was not she who looked small, it was everyone else. The weight of Nicholas Ashford's words still hung in the air, like the aftermath of a thunderclap, when he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a slim black folder, the kind that spelled endings for empires and beginnings for new dynasties. He opened it with a flick of his wrist, revealing a thick stack of freshly signed documents, each page heavy with legal authority and finality. "For clarity," he said, voice cutting sharper now, almost cruel in its precision, "this isn't just a symbolic acquisition, effective immediately. Every asset under the Harrington supermarket brand, yes, every store, every license, every executive contract, it belongs to Ashford Holdings, and that includes this location." His words detonated like landmines under the feet of the stunned staff and shoppers. Faces turned sheet white. Managers who had once strutted like kings among the aisles now looked as if they might collapse where they stood. Daphne, the gum-popping cashier who had smirked at Amelia with such gleeful contempt, visibly swayed, her hand clamping onto the counter for support. Nicholas's gaze, sharp and merciless, pinned her like an insect under glass. "Miss Daphne," he said with quiet venom, "you are hereby terminated for cause. Effective now. Leave your apron at the register." Gasps rippled outward again, but Nicholas wasn't finished. His attention swept the room, eyes cataloging each face, each petty cruelty, each cowardly laugh that had echoed through the store hours earlier. "Any employee who participated in the harassment of my fiancé will be reviewed and dismissed. Your names are already recorded. Your behavior will follow you into every background check you ever submit again. Consider this your legacy." The words struck harder than fists. The realization was total, merciless. There would be no second chance, no quiet cover-up, no forgetting. Amelia stood beside him, her hands steady now, her spine straight, her eyes gleaming not with vengeance but with a quiet, searing certainty. She didn't need to say a word. Nicholas was her voice now, amplified and unstoppable, burning through the rot that had once dared to call itself elite. He turned slightly, addressing the stunned crowd with a final note of disdain. "You thought wealth was measured by the cut of a jacket or the price of a handbag," he said, each word deliberate, merciless, but real wealth, real power, does not announce itself. It watches, it waits, and when it moves, it does not ask permission. He slipped the folder back into his jacket with a final, fatal snap, as if sealing the fates of everyone in that room inside its leather cover forever. Around him, the once mighty of the Harrington supermarket chain crumbled, not with noise, but with the quiet, helpless collapse of people who realized, too late, that they had spat on a queen and poked a sleeping giant. The moment Nicholas's final words dropped into the suffocating silence, two sharply dressed men in dark suits entered the store from behind him, their movements swift, clinical, unstoppable. They moved through the aisles like wolves among sheep, approaching the employees who had laughed, sneered, humiliated, their names already in hand, their fates already sealed. Daphne barely had time to whimper a protest before her headset was ripped off her ear, her name tag removed with surgical precision, her termination papers thrust into her trembling hands. She stumbled backward, her eyes darting wildly to the store manager. "Mr. Carlson." But there was no salvation there, only the realization that he too was being approached by another suited enforcer, his clipboard bearing a termination notice so coldly worded it might as well have been a death certificate. "You can't do this," Carlson blustered, voice shaking, face mottled red, but Nicholas didn't even glance at him. "You should have thought of that before you let your store become a playground for cowards," he said, voice low, deadly. One by one, every employee who had laughed at Amelia, every cashier who had sneered, every manager who had looked the other way, was stripped of their authority, their security badges disabled, their employment terminated without apology, without ceremony, their futures reduced to a footnote in a corporation that now belonged to the woman they had tried to destroy. The crowd of shoppers who had egged them on weren't spared either. Nicholas's security team recorded the names and images of those who had filmed, mocked, and posted about Amelia online. Lawsuits were already being prepared, defamation charges filed, bans from every Ashford-owned property issued before the first tears had even fully fallen. Amelia stood at Nicholas's side, her expression calm, distant, untouched by the chaos swirling around her. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't lower herself to their level. Her very dignity was its own weapon, sharper and more devastating than any shouted insult. Some tried to plead, tried to beg. "Please, I didn't mean it. It was just a joke." But Nicholas's security team moved without pause, without mercy, escorting them out the same automatic doors through which they had humiliated Amelia hours earlier. Only now they were the ones with heads bowed, faces flushed with shame, their laughter long since died into the hollow silence of regret. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the pavement, and in that fading light, the old order collapsed, the false power built on cruelty crumbled, and justice, cold, immediate, irreversible, was delivered, not with screams, not with violence, but with quiet, brutal finality. As the last of the guilty were escorted out under the cold, clinical glare of justice, a different kind of silence settled over the store. Lighter, warmer, expectant. Nicholas turned, scanning the remaining faces, and it was then that Amelia gently touched his arm, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the heavy air. "There were a few," she said, her eyes shining with quiet gratitude, "who showed kindness when no one else did." Nicholas nodded once, a silent command, and immediately his team moved again, but this time their movements were different. Deliberate, respectful. Near the end of aisle 7 stood a teenage stockboy, his uniform slightly rumpled, his hands still trembling from where he had tried, earlier, to intervene when Daphne had first started her cruel commentary. He had lowered his eyes then, afraid, powerless. But he had offered Amelia a bottle of water, had whispered, "Don't listen to them," when he thought no one was watching. Now, Nicholas approached him directly, his presence towering but not threatening. "What's your name?" Nicholas asked. "Tyler," the boy stammered, cheeks flushed. Nicholas handed him a sleek black card, heavy with embossed gold lettering. "Full scholarship," Nicholas said simply, his voice carrying through the store like a vow. "Any school, any degree, Ashford Foundation will cover it all. You showed more courage today than 1,000 men twice your age. Don't waste it." Tyler's eyes widened, his mouth trembling as he clutched the card like a lifeline, nodding furiously, too overwhelmed to speak. Across the store, an older woman, a janitor in a faded uniform, wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her shirt. She had been the one who hurried over when Amelia slipped, offering a hand to steady her when no one else even looked. Amelia crossed the floor herself, taking the woman's hands into her own and squeezing them gently. "You saw me when they chose not to," she said. "You will be promoted immediately, double your salary, full health care, and if you ever want to move beyond here, come find me. I'll make sure you get there." Tears streamed down the woman's cheeks as she clutched Amelia's hands, whispering, "Thank you, thank you," over and over as if it were a prayer. In that moment, the store transformed, and it is not through wealth, not through dominance, but through recognition, through the lifting up of those whose goodness had survived the storm, around them, those who remained, those who had neither mocked nor helped, watched in stunned silence, understanding, too late, that in the end, it was not cruelty that was rewarded, but kindness, quiet and inconvenient though it may be. Nicholas turned back to Amelia, his smile private, reserved for her alone, and in that small exchange was a simple truth louder than any speech. Power is not measured by how many kneel before you, but by how many you choose to lift. As the last echoes of stunned silence settled over the polished floors of the Harrington supermarket, Amelia took a small, steady step forward, her simple gray sweater still clinging to her form, her hair slightly disheveled from the chaos. Yet, somehow, in that moment, she radiated a gravity that no designer gown or diamond tiara could ever match. She lifted her chin, swept her gaze across the room, across the few who had remained, the staff, the stragglers, the bystanders. And when she spoke, her voice was neither loud nor shaking, but clear, resonant, unstoppable. "Today," she said, "I was judged the moment I walked through those doors. Not for who I am, not for my heart, my mind, or my worth, but for the brand of my shoes, the fabric of my sweater, the price tag you imagine dangling from my life." A heavy, almost guilty stillness gripped the room. "You measured me against your standards of worth, against wealth, appearance, privilege, and you found me lacking," she continued, her voice growing stronger, slicing through the sterile air like a scalpel. "But worth," she said, her hand pressing lightly over her heart, "does not come stitched into designer labels or pinned to paychecks. Worth is forged in the fires you never see, so worth, in sacrifices made in silence, in battles fought alone, in dignity maintained when no one is watching. The staff, the shoppers, the young stock boy Tyler. They watched, frozen, their eyes wide, their faces reflecting the slow, painful shift of shame, awakening, and awe. "Today you chose to laugh," Amelia said, not with anger, but with a sorrow that cut deeper than rage. "You chose cruelty because it was easier, because it made you feel bigger. But true strength, real strength, is found not in who you can push down, but in who you choose to lift up." She let that truth settle for a heartbeat, then two, before drawing in a slow breath and delivering the final blow. Not with venom, but with heartbreaking grace. "One day," she said, her voice a soft, devastating promise, "you will meet someone else who doesn't fit your image of success, someone who looks small, someone you think doesn't matter, and when that moment comes, I hope you remember this day. I hope you remember that the world you built with your mockery collapsed under the weight of a woman you refused to see. Silence thickened around her, a silence filled not with condemnation, but with reflection, heavy and raw. Nicholas watched her with pride burning in his eyes, but he didn't move, didn't interrupt. This was her moment, hers alone. Amelia's hand dropped back to her side, her posture regal, unbowed, a woman who had been broken, belittled, and bruised, and who had still risen higher than any of them could ever reach. The moment Amelia's words faded into the still, reverent air, something profound shifted. Not just in the supermarket, but in the people who remained. Heads once held high with arrogance, now bowed low in shame. Faces once twisted in amusement, now softened with the heavy, undeniable weight of regret. Amelia turned, her hand finding Nicholas's effortlessly, his fingers curling around hers in a silent vow, a bond unshaken by the day's storms. Together they walked through the gleaming aisles, past rows of imported goods and forgotten prejudices, past the remnants of laughter that had long since curdled into bitter silence. Staff members stepped aside, some with tears in their eyes, some placing a hand over their hearts in the unspoken apology. But Amelia did not stop. She did not linger in resentment or gloat over their downfall. She moved forward, graceful and unburdened, her dignity intact, her spirit radiant. The automatic doors whooshed open ahead, and for the first time, the outside world didn't feel cold or indifferent. It felt wide, endless, welcoming. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden light across the parking lot, gilding the edges of the moment like the final brushstroke of a masterpiece. Nicholas's car waited at the curb, the sleek engine purring softly, a promise of new beginnings. He opened the door for her with a small, reverent bow that made her laugh, soft and genuine, a sound so full of life and resilience that it seemed to chase away the last lingering shadows. As Amelia slid into the car, she glanced back one last time, not with anger, not with longing, but with a deep, peaceful certainty. She had nothing to prove anymore. She never did. She had walked through fire, through humiliation, through cruelty sharpened into weapons. And she had emerged not just standing, but soaring. Nicholas joined her in the car, their hands finding each other again without hesitation, two souls aligned not by wealth or power, but by something far rarer. Respect, loyalty, truth. The engine roared to life, and as they pulled away from the Harrington supermarket, leaving behind the ruins of false superiority and shallow judgment, the horizon stretched open before them, vast and burning with possibility. And somewhere deep inside her chest, Amelia knew this was just the beginning, long after the car disappeared into the city lights, long after the last echoes of humiliation and redemption faded from the polished floors of the Harrington supermarket. A truth lingered, heavy, undeniable, etched into every silent corner like a scar carved by invisible hands. They had measured her by her clothes, by her shoes, by the imagined value they assigned to the quiet dignity she carried, and in doing so, they had revealed not her worthlessness, but their own blindness, because true worth, the kind that cannot be bought, cannot be faked, cannot be destroyed, does not shimmer under crystal chandeliers or glint from diamond rings. It beats quietly in the chests of those who choose kindness when cruelty is easy, who stand tall when the world demands they kneel, who walk alone when mockery roars louder than applause. Amelia Hart did not win today because she was richer than them, or because Nicholas Ashford wielded the power to dismantle their petty kingdoms with a signature. She won because she never needed their validation in the first place. She walked into their golden palace of judgment wearing worn sneakers and a simple sweater. And she walked out owning it, not with vengeance, but with grace. And for those who laughed, who pointed, who filmed and mocked and turned human dignity into entertainment, there would always remain one bitter, unerasable truth. You never know who you are mocking until it is far too late to take it back. Judge less. Look deeper. Choose kindness, Not because it is safe, not because it is profitable, but because it is right. Oh, because one day, when the masks fall and the crowns crumble, kindness will be the only true currency left standing. She didn't fight back with rage. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stood and let the truth bury those who had buried their own humanity. Remember this moment. Not because a billionaire bought a store, but because a humble woman proved that dignity needs no price tag and kindness needs no permission. Next time you see someone walk in wearing simple shoes and carrying quiet dreams, choose compassion, because arrogance falls, but kindness, it rises forever.